If you're trying to conceive and feeling overwhelmed with fertility advice, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to Don't Tell Me to Relax, your fertility podcast and antidote to unhelpful fertility information. I'm Hannah, a fertility acupuncturist, teacher and campaigner for better fertility education. This podcast aims to empower and inform you about your menstrual cycle and fertility. It's basically all that information you didn't get in sex ed at school, with the aim of improving your understanding of your reproductive health and optimizing your fertility. Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of Don't Tell Me to Relax. So today is a first on our podcast because I am actually joined by a lovely lady who I have worked with and has actually been a patient of mine, and we've never actually had anyone who's ever been in our clinic on the podcast, but Charlotte is somebody who I just really wanted to get on because she's so inspirational, and you've done quite a few podcasts previously, I think, for other people, and you have had quite the journey to get to where you are. So Charlotte, would you like to introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit? Let's sort of start off with, well, where are you at the moment?
Sure. Well, hello. Thank you for that very sweet introduction. So yeah, Charlotte, I am nearly 40 weeks pregnant. So it's Monday today and my due date is on Wednesday. So it feels quite surreal saying that, and I guess probably for some people listening, want to be sensitive to that. But I am very much ready to pop. This is first baby, and it's been quite the journey to get here. Quite intense, not necessarily the longest. I know a lot of people, we have had fertility struggles, but it's been quite an intense sort of 3 and a bit years, really.
And Charlotte, I mean, it's obviously wonderful that you're sitting here in front of me about to have your baby. Tell me, or tell us, when did you start? Like, tell us the journey to starting trying to conceive.
Sure. So April 2021 came around. We started trying in that May after that, my first period. Didn't get pregnant the first month. It's one of those funny things now looking back, because getting that first sort of period, you're like, no, we haven't done it. And you're like, okay, this is month 1. Didn't let that get too into my head, but was one of those things that looking back now, it's ironic thinking that I was sort of semi-disappointed because again, and you've alluded to it many times before, you're always taught, like, if you've got the goalie, if you're on the pill, whatever you're using, you're not going to get pregnant. But as soon as that's taken away, you're going to be pregnant straight away. Anyway, month 2 came around, so that would have been the June 2021. We tried again, and then come July, my period didn't arrive. So I've been on a really boozy night the night before, at a bit of wedding, and then went to a friend's barbecue. Vividly remember being dressed in a bright pink wig. It was good old fun evening. And then the next morning I was like, right, well, I think I'm like a day or so late, so just walked and got a pregnancy test, and there we go, you got the flashing pregnant sign. So it was like, fantastic, we've nailed this, second month in. So that was July 2020 start of July 2021. And then from keeping it a bit of a secret, you're in the summer period, you've got drinks with work, all of that kind of going up to the bar ahead and saying, I'm pregnant, if we get drinks, can you make sure you serve me a non-alcoholic drink, trying to keep everything under wraps. And then the start of August came round, and unfortunately we experienced our first miscarriage. So I was about 7.5 weeks pregnant, so still early. And as I say, working real estate, I was with a junior member of staff. I was walking to a viewing with her, and I just felt this sort of little gush. I thought it's almost like I've dribbled, but a bit more than a dribble, and I thought that doesn't feel right. Went to the key office, took the keys, popped out of the toilet, said to my colleague who didn't know, just hit the loo. And then unfortunately evidence was there in my knickers. So it was sort of quite bright and a gush of blood. So immediately went home. The doctors the next morning, I called the doctor, and they said just go to the EPU the next morning. EPU being these terminologies you learn quite quickly, but early pregnancy unit at St George's in London. Excuse me. And that was our first experience of that part of St George's Hospital. So effectively, they said it would likely be a non-viable pregnancy, but on the notes they had to put that it was still viable because there was a flicker, there was a heartbeat, not that we heard anything. So effectively, I was still pregnant, but I'd had a bleed, and it was likely that I would lose it, was the advice. So they effectively said, what do you want? It's up to you. Basically, you need to kind of go away and wait for this to come away and come back and see us in a couple of weeks. So it was all a bit weird because I'd never heard of something called a missed miscarriage before, which was effectively what this first one was. And, it was that kind of like, so am I pregnant? Am I not pregnant? I remember having a big wedding the following weekend, and it was a weird one because it was like, do I drink? Do I not drink? Do I not drink because I don't want to get emotional at a wedding, but I'm not actually pregnant, but I am? It was a very, very weird, a weird place and a weird feeling. So a week, 10 days later, came back, had an appointment, which was then 2 weeks after, and I still hadn't miscarried. I hadn't really had any further bleeding from that sort of first 24-hour period. And I was told then I could basically opt to have surgery. I could opt to do the medication, or I could continue to wait it out. And at that point, I just wanted to sort of have a sort of definite end to it. So I opted for surgery. So I had I think it's called a DNC back in the day. Again, I was lucky, if you can call it lucky. I didn't have any pain. I didn't have a lot of discomfort or bleeding afterwards.
And did you take any time off? What did you do to recover from that experience?
Yeah, so I am very fortunate that whilst I do work in quite a male-dominated environment, I am quite a talker. I'm a over communicator, if anything, and I did have the support of my two senior heads of team, both men. I was frank with them from the start that this had happened. This was kind of the day it happened. I'd said why I had to go home, and they were great about it. My HR team was great about it. I mean, I do work for a big corporate, so I have that advantage. But effectively, I had 2 weeks bereavement leave that I could take, of which part of that is when I flew out to Spain, just kind of for a bit of escapism.
Yeah. And what happened next?
So that was the summer. We actually had to wait for 3 months because there was a potential that it could have been what was called a molar pregnancy, which again, you're like, what's a molar pregnancy? I've never heard of this. Again, fortunately, it wasn't, but a molar pregnancy is where the remains could turn cancerous and they could continue to grow inside you, which again, you just think, wow, like females going through trying to conceive, I'd never heard of that. So the remains were sent off to Charing Cross to be tested. And again, a bit of a hiccup from the NHS, but I was waiting for the call to say you could start trying because you're effectively not allowed to try in that period. I didn't really get that call. And eventually I had to follow up and say, look, it's now October. So that happened in the August. Have you got my results? Oh, yeah, we have. Okay, great. Thanks. Is anyone going to let me know?
That must have been so frustrating because you just kind of want to get on and try again in that situation, so being told to wait.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Yeah, it is. And I think that was probably my first experience of waiting, but I guess the summer was there and, I could understand the severity of, why you shouldn't try. Again, yeah, we wanted to get going. You can kind of start seeing you suddenly, as soon as you want to start trying for a baby, you're fixated on months and period dates, and you just can't help it. And when people say to you, just relax, that's about the name of the podcast, or don't tell me to relax, or just try not to think about it. It's like, just to be clear, we have a monthly reminder.
Yeah,
I have to go to the shops, or I have to use tampons or whatever. It's not like something you can just breeze over here.
Yeah.
So yes, I had that wait, and then I think from the October we got the AOK that we could try, and we didn't have the risk. We didn't have the motor pregnancy, so we then started trying again. Then went on a very boozy hen do to Chamonix for a friend in February, and I came back from that and I was pregnant again. So whatever had happened, take the pressure away, it worked. So this was then February 2022. I remember, you think naively now, but Mother's Day came up, so another month later, so around the 22nd of March. And I wrote in my mum's Mother's Day card. I hadn't told my parents yet, but wanted to let them know because obviously they've been very supportive. And I'm a big talker with my parents. So, and I put in the Mother's Day card, happy Mother's Day, love Charlotte, Chris, my husband. And so Mum got super emotional and was like, oh, God, amazing. We were like, nothing's going to go wrong. And I think for me, what I was holding on to was trying to be pregnant again before my due date. Because that that was something that I knew was coming, which ironically, my due date was the Mother's Day of that. I think it was like the 27th, and the day before I started to bleed again. So you go like, oh, come on, this is like, this cruel timing.
Yeah.
So as I said, I had the hope that I was pregnant again before the kind of the due date, which was engraved in your mind. And I wasn't anymore. So I had started to bleed. So at this time, it was about 5.5 weeks. So it was a bit sooner than the last pregnancy. So it was still early. I went back to the EPU, had the same nurse. This time she confirmed that there was no sac. There was, you had to have a blood test to prove, well, not prove, but that you were pregnant. Which obviously I had weed on the stick, and I had a couple of sticks, and I knew that my HCG hormone was present, but they obviously needed to confirm that. So that one again, and I think it's because they were early, it was a light bleed. I took about 1.5 weeks off work for that one. I remember there being something that I needed to be in, I wanted to be in for, so I took a little bit less time. And again, it was, of course, it's crap and it's emotional, and you think, come on, like, this is really unfortunate. And the timing around it being Mother's Day was just like, shit. Happened again. And I knew that it was common for my mother, kind of lent to my mother-in-law who'd had two. And, it was tough because I also had a good friend who was about to have her third, and another good friend who was about to have their second. So that's one of the hardest things around it all, is the announcements of other people, or you kind of hook onto, that pregnant person's going to be pregnant, we're going to have our mat leave and it's going to be so wonderful, and we're going to go coffee together and it's going to be so great. And you see them moving forwards, and then you stand still, and it's unfair, and you have these ugly feelings, jealousy, which, you're only happy for them because you know how difficult it is that what you're going through. And you start to learn quite quickly how difficult it is actually to get pregnant and for it to work. It was tough. So that was miscarriage number 2. So again, at this point, I have private medical insurance through work, although ironically, again, I think like most policies, there's very few companies that cover any fertility. But I didn't think we'd not quite hit a year of trying, or we were about to sort of hit a year of trying. I think I have in my mind, well, the NHS, you've got to try for a year, and actually we'd fallen pregnant twice. So we were kind of good at the falling pregnant bit. We just weren't good at the holding on to it. And again, this kind of rhetoric of, well, miscarriages is common. Miscarriages are common. So we didn't think to kind of have any further testing at that point. So we just thought we'd go again. So that was, as I say, the March 2022. April came around, May, and then in the June we fell pregnant again. In really a year we'd fallen pregnant 3 times. So again, delighted, kind of third time lucky. You jump on that sort of cliche, and you think this not going to go wrong this time. So again, we were mindful. We didn't tell people at that point, just because we wanted to kind of get through those milestones of getting a bit further along. And I remember I had a work triathlon. It was a Friday at the end of June. I was meant to be going to see Adele in the evening, and it felt really ropey. And I did my bit of the triathlon, swimming in the Eton Dorney Lake. I still felt good. I never had any symptoms or anything like from the pregnancy. So some people have them immediately. I never did. And then that evening, as I say, I meant to go and see Adele. I had to cancel. I was like, I can't. I feel so rough. I don't actually know if there's anything to do with the miscarriage, because I hadn't felt ill the 2 previous times. I don't know if I just had a bug, but I remember as well, I had a lovely collection of books I'd done for my friend's baby shower from all the girlfriends and family members for her. And the next day, the Saturday morning, I went to the toilet, and there was sort of some dark, it wasn't like bright red, but it was dark discharge. And I thought, this isn't. My husband was at Fixtures because he's a PE teacher, and I was like, I'm doing this on my own, so I didn't want to worry him. Dropped the books around to my friend, said I hadn't been very well, wasn't going to make a baby shower, but to have a really nice day that I wished that I could have one day. And that evening a little bit more, and then we went to the early pregnancy unit the next day, and effectively this was about 5 weeks this time, and when they scanned me they couldn't see anything, so that's really tricky, because then you start second guessing yourself, and you're like, well, I've done a pregnancy test, or done 2 of them, and it was, it says I'm pregnant, so is the hormone there, is it not? But this time they couldn't see, I'm trying to think what the term is, when they don't see a pregnancy at all. It'll come to me. So effectively they had to do a blood test to sort of prove that I was pregnant, and I was adamant at this point that I needed to be told that I was pregnant, because this was number 3. So in my mind, and before, the regulations have changed now, but you had to have had 3 miscarriages before you would get any further testing. So I needed this to be a pregnancy, because
chemical pregnancy.
Yeah, there we go. So I needed it to be a pregnancy because I just needed there to be like some form now of investigating. So I was sent away. So I had a blood test, sent away. Again, escaped. I said, I got the test result back, and they said your HCG is present, so you are pregnant, or you were pregnant. And again, had a really good relationship with the same nurse who'd seen us, who'd given us so much hope that first time. You will get there, and this is like the 3rd time now. So something at this point is thinking like, well, why is this happening? So again, it sort of backed onto a holiday because the time of year. So I had a couple of weeks off, I think maybe 3 weeks, because I backed onto a holiday, and just frustration and upset and anger. Why us? Why again? Why can't I do this? We seem to get pregnant. Like, what's going on? Everybody else is getting pregnant. Everyone else is having their babies. I'm missing another slot to be pregnant with my next set of best friends. And it was just shit. And the waiting, the time it takes, everything is just, it felt like time was standing still, but everybody else was moving forwards, which was really tricky. So that was the 3. And then I guess is where we started the ball rolling with testing.
Yes. And I mean, it's so difficult, isn't it? Because really, you would hope that people would get investigations and testing after 2 and not have to wait for 3. But unfortunately, they are the guidelines, even though those guidelines are actually based on actual reasons rather than actual patient care or medical reasons. So where did you go for the next step of testing and investigations?
Sure. So I actually managed to, after the 2nd, I sort of managed to wangle getting a date, a gynecology. I can't remember if it was a gynecology appointment or whether was it under the recurring miscarriage clinic. But I was pretty forceful with my GP to say I wanted to understand. I had 2 now, and they were like, "Oh, well, the rules are 3," and I was like, so basically, like, I don't care. My mental health is not good. I want to be seen. So I'd sort of, I'd effectively not missed the cue, but I remember we actually went to an appointment, and I was pregnant the 3rd time. And effectively, the lady said, "Well, you're pregnant. There's nothing we can do now. That's great news. Off you go. I'm sure this one will be okay." And I think that was something like the week before I miscarried. So again, the frustration there of going, we've waited 3 months for that appointment, had the appointment, you effectively get discharged, and then I lost the pregnancy a week later, and I was like, oh my god, like I can't wait another 3 months. I've got to get straight on this. And I managed to, being persistent, get hold of the secretary of the clinic, and I pushed to have effectively like a cancellation appointment. So I didn't know when it was coming, but I was going to be there, and again, work was supportive of that, so I could attend. I think we ended up managed to get one a month after that 3rd miscarriage, only to be told that they couldn't do anything because they needed my body to be rid of pregnancy for a minimum of 3 months. Which again, I guess that's the reason why they don't let people like me push the system and push the queue, because normally you then get sent out your letter and it is 3, 4, 5 months down the line, so it's probably never really a problem. But I was so frustrated that nobody had communicated to me effectively once I'd had my 3rd miscarriage. And maybe it's because, they don't think it's the right time at the hospital when you've just been told you've had your 3rd miscarriage, and it probably isn't the right time. But kind of like, I felt a follow-up appointment maybe 2 weeks later or something should have come to say, this is the process now. If you're going to do investigations, we have to wait. And I get it. I get that they needed to then test my bloods and my levels when the pregnancy had left my body. So I could understand the logic. I was just not informed that was the process. And so again, this was like my first real experience of the wait. So we had then to wait until I think we had an appointment. So the miscarriage was in the June, I think it was the September. And at this point, I should probably add that I'd got quite involved in, well, not really involved, but I felt like I needed to find those communities and those support groups that could help me move from the kind of trying to conceive gang of people to I've had a miscarriage gang to I've kind of had multiple miscarriages now, and miscarriage and two others. So I did follow the likes of the Worst Girl Gang Ever. I found their kind of quite hard-hitting, dark humour posts on Instagram quite helpful. They really spoke to me, as well as the kind of like educational piece for other people, like what not to say and what not to ask. And I became quite I went public on my Instagram and tried to share those things to try and help educate people on things not to say, which hands up, I definitely said some of those things in the past, for sure. Being ignorant to the fact that I didn't know how some of those things might land if somebody was struggling. So I sort of listened to that. There's a lady, I think actually you might have done so with a CC fertility
day over
in Australia.
Yeah.
I kind of came across her a bit later, but I thought she was like super helpful. And I think I reached out or wanted to be vocal about it because I didn't like doing it on my own. It felt isolating, and whilst I had amazing friends and amazing family and the few people that had experience, like I didn't feel there was anyone close to me that was struggling in this way. So I think I had an appointment in the September time of 2022 that effectively said, we'll take your bloods. And so I think I had bloods done at the end of September. The blood test results effectively said that I had a very, very low AMH, so anti-Mullerian hormone, which is your egg reserve, so the number of eggs that you have left. So that red flagged. Now, I took photos of the results and straight away to like GP friends, like, oh God, like what's this? And they effectively said, we need to just do another. They were quite casual about it. And they just said, we need to do another test in a month. Like, oh, for God's sake, like, okay, we'll do another test in a month. And that's what we did. And I remember it was my Christmas party on the 8th of December, 2022. And I came home from it at lunchtime to go to the appointment. And this was at the Recurrent Miscarriage Clinic at St George's. And effectively they red flagged again and said, we've done the test. It wasn't a mistest. Your level is really low. So on average, if we can talk averages, on average, a woman's AMH should be, and I was 33 at the time, should be between 8 and 20. You can be higher than that, which means you've got a higher reserve, like say if you've got polycystic ovaries where you almost don't have your periods as regularly, so they're not releasing as much, or you can be lower. So between 8 and 20 is the average, is what the NHS said. And I was a 1.6 on my first test and 1.1 on my second. So really low. So I guess that it wasn't an answer we wanted. I didn't really understand, but I could fathom that was the reason why we were probably miscarrying, because the quality of my egg, the eggs I had left, are low quality.
Sorry, Charlotte, can I just ask as well, did you also have high FSH in your readings?
I've got to remember now, because I remember that was I think I did, yes.
Yeah, because there's always a debate, isn't there, around AMH and your ability to conceive with AMH, and for some people, low AMH doesn't impact your ability to conceive, but I think for you it was the combination of low AMH and high FSH with your age was like, they were the combination, the flags, weren't they?
Yeah, I think you're right. I just remember the AMH so vividly because it was so low.
Yeah.
But yes, so all of these things, again, you're like, God, what's that language? What does this mean? What are these hormones? You don't get taught any of this at school. So the response from the clinician was, I would recommend that you do IVF and you do it fast, because again, something I didn't realize, but your eggs are dying off in the background every month. So that was not what we were expecting. And so from the January 2023, we started the IVF process.
And how many, did you ever get a diagnosis of like premature ovarian insufficiency? Did anyone ever talk labels to you?
We talked about it, and I think I sort of maybe self-labeled myself. But actually, so again, I guess what I'd researched on that was was I premenopausal? And by that point, I thought, like, am I going to go through all of those menopause responses like really soon? And do I need to bank what eggs I do have now? Which are kind of, I guess, is probably a similar-ish process to what you would have if you had POI.
Yeah.
But I was never actually, because I'd conceived and because they said like my egg reserve could have always been really low. effectively, they just didn't know, because we don't get tested as women and these sorts of things from young to have any comparison. I was never fully given that label, even though that was on my back of my mind to be like, God, I could literally run out of eggs at any month. And that's kind of the worry that, and she didn't, put the fear of God in me, but the practitioner at their recurring miscarriage clinic, that was the message I took. Like, you need to get on with this, because you don't know when they're going to stop. And to me, eggs stopping releasing meant immediate menopause, just because I didn't really fully understand that probably wouldn't happen. And I was told, I think later on, that I'm not due the menopause next week or next month. But yes, my egg reserve was low.
And so how was IVF then? Because obviously, there's always this conversation, isn't there? But that when you have lower egg reserves, IVF sometimes can be problematic, because IVF clinics want you to have a larger number of follicles, or a higher AMH, because obviously it becomes a numbers game, doesn't it? So that, the more follicles you have, the more opportunities there are to have eggs, the more opportunities to create embryos, the more embryos, the higher the chances of it being successful. So when you go in with an AMH of 1, like what is a completely different experience.
So I think one thing I'll commend the clinic on, so it was Concept Fertility Clinic in Wandsworth, was that they were very fair, and I felt very honest with us from sort of day one. They sort of said our chances were about 10-15% with IVF, because of the fact that my egg number is low, and therefore the quality was also low. So we kept that statistic back from people for a little while. People don't want to see you get hurt. People don't want to see you plumbing money into something that those odds are that low. I remember particularly with my family, who just don't want you to be upset and sad. Like, I didn't necessarily reveal to them that was how low our chances were, because they would encourage us otherwise. But is this the way you should spend your money? It's like, well, that's easy for you to say. You had me and my brother, so you've not had this experience of wanting to have this child. So they were fair in that instance, and I think something that they tried to get into us from the word go, and actually some of the, I guess, the fertility communities, or was try not to, but get fixated on numbers. So we did 3 backgrounds, and again, I think when you go into the IVF process, because it's almost how the language is that you're paying to fix a problem. You think it's going to work. End of January was our first attempt, and we got, I think it was 5 follicles, 5 eggs. So it really ranges. I would never overstimulate, because I didn't have enough follicles to overstimulate. I had friends that had, or sort of, you start to then meet friends of friends that you can kind of lean on and talk to. My friend's gone through IVF. Let me send you her number if you want to ask questions. And I knew 2 people, one that overstimulated, so had 30 eggs, and another had like 28, and they were really uncomfortable because they had like golf balls of ovaries, like ready to burst. Whereas I was never gonna, I did ask that question. I remember the doctor sort of not laughing at me, with me. He was like, if you overstimulate, then we'll be writing a paper about you, because your reserve is so low. I think we had like 8 follicles. So you're kind of thinking, okay, 8, this is okay. Like, we're going to have the 5, excuse me, 5. We got 5 eggs out. And I remember there's just literally a curtain. And I remember the bay next door, the lady had come through, and they were like, oh, we got something like 12. And I was there thinking, I got 5, she got 12. And I remember the response was like, to them was like, well, we're going to go again, because we're going to make sure you get a load more. And I was just thinking, I wish I was that person who just managed to get 11 or 12 eggs. And that was upsetting. And I fed that back. I was like, I don't think those conversations should be had in an open space, because that was sensitive for me, because I knew that I would never get that many, and I'd just come round and I'd hope for more. So in that first round, they effectively then allowed my husband's sperm, so he has to go off into his little room with his pot, and then they kind of swirl them around together, the IVF bit, and we didn't get any viable embryos from that round. So again, you kind of think, oh God, okay, that was a lot of money for it not to work, but it's okay, because we've got another 2, and maybe we'll try slightly different medication now. So second round, slightly different treatment plan. We managed to get 1 embryo to blastocyst. So blastocyst is once the egg has been taken out, or the eggs, and we did ICSI that time, which was effectively where they chose my husband's sperm. It's another £1,000, but you're kind of, at this point, you're like, well, yeah, we got to do it. and they hand pick the sperm and inject the sperm into the embryo, into the egg to form the embryo, in the hope that there's a guarantee. Because what we didn't want to have to do was have good eggs, but that time my husband's swimmers were just not hitting the egg. So it was like, right, well, you kind of feel a pressure to be like, well, we've got to give everything here. So yes, here, where's my checkbook or whatever? Sign me up. And I think we had 3 on the go, and then 2 failed, I think, or stopped growing around day 2 or day 3. And then this one little one held on. It didn't quite make blastocyst on day 5, but they knew that our odds were so low. They said they continued to culture it and see where they got to on day 6. So it was a day 6 blastocyst. And they said it was compacting. It was a very low quality. So they graded it as a 3 cc embryo. But they said, we're going to freeze it because we just, we don't know what your chances are of having any others. So great. We had 1 embryo. 3rd round, we did this again, slightly different treatment plan again, different medication, just to see how my body adapted to the stimulants. No embryos. So we've done three rounds. Financially now we're sort of talking around like 18k, and we've got 1 embryo on ice. So that kind of expectation going into it of like, we'll probably get 4 or 5, and we'll have a brother and sister on ice, and we've gone through this whole like we're going to be fine. We're going to get married and have 2 kids, and everything will be down day 2. You got really low egg reserve, and you might not ever have, your chances are super low with your eggs. And then you're going to go through that process of like, this might actually not happen, regardless of how much money we spent on that. So you're kind of in that rut. And then at that point, I read a book by an American biochemist, I think she is, called It Starts with the Egg.
Yeah.
Which sounds like it was really scientific. It's not. It's like really layman's term up front, and then they have all the journals you can refer to if you want to do extra reading, but I didn't do any of that. I just read the book. And I think around that time I'd sort of come across yourselves as well, or you and your podcast and your clinic, and I knew you were local, and we got in touch, and I came along to your community clinic, and I think at that point we said we wanted, before we tried putting that embryo in, because then we said if it was successful, it would effectively then 10-month pregnancy, plus then you give birth, then your mind's not going back and straight into the fertility clinic, so it could be another 6 months. My fear was these eggs that I did have were going to be gone by that point. So I wanted to, whilst we had that 1 on ice, I wanted to give it 1 last shot, but do everything by the book, like absolutely everything. There were suggestions in this book on cutting out plastic, got rid of all Tupperwares, got rid of plastic chopping boards, glass bottles of water, hair products. I haven't had my hair highlights done for over a year and 10 months now, but like not have your hair colors, not get your nails done. Basically, like I was washing my hair with a vegan block of shampoo and conditioner, like everything that we could do. So cutting out BPAs, cutting out phthalates, trying to be zen, do the acupuncture, chat to you. You were coming at it from a different perspective. Just everything that I could do. We went on test. I mean, you and I had a long conversation about it, and perhaps exploring other clinics and tablets that I could take, vitamins. So I took my knowledge. I didn't do a Dr. Google, but I took this book into my clinic and said, I know it might not make a difference, but if this doesn't, I want to do everything we can in a 4 or 5 month period. And effectively, they said testosterone was potentially, I had a lower test, or to give me more testosterone might help the quality of the egg. So, that could come with risks of growing facial hair, deeper voice, getting more butch, etc. But I was like, if that's what spotty, acne, hair loss, if that's what I needed to do to try and make this work, then that's what I was going to do. Vanity could go aside. And there were other NAC, NAC, and acetyl acid, I can't remember what they all are, but a load of drugs. And I thought, let's just give this everything. Because then I felt that if after 4 months, so you needed to take the testosterone for 3 to 4 months for it to maybe have, or 2 to 3 months to have an impact, to make a difference. So that's why it was sort of 4 or 5 months in my mind. So from the March, so April, May, June, July, and then we would try and go again and have another extraction and do a final round in sort of summer of 2023. And during that period, I would do everything I could possibly do for marginal gains, to know that at the end, if it didn't work, we could close the door on, we would obviously still have the embryo, which we would give a go, but we could close the door. I could close the door knowing I did everything that I could have done, and not continue to spend the money of £6,000 a time, and then fully explore egg donor, where our chances went from sort of that 10%, less than 10%, up to about 85%. Yeah. So in the August time of 2023, we did one more round. This was after the pause. I think obviously I'd come to see you for some acupuncture, at the right times, and you obviously putting your needles in the right places for the time of the month that I was on, etc. Just before my extraction. And I think we got again. I think it was less eggs. I was really disappointed because I was like, wait, what? We've just done all of this. And I knew that was a risk, but I just never believed. I think, if you're a trier, if you put your effort in, if you do everything in life, I've always got results in that way. And this is what is so frustrating, because this is not something you can necessarily put effort to. It's just one of those things, what my body will do or won't. And we didn't get any embryos. So we were no further along. And I think at that point, I was glad that we hadn't decided to sign up to like the triple package. It was enough kind of closure for us to sort of say, we did everything. There's nothing more that we could have done. No caffeine, no drinking, anything, healthy living, high protein, the taking the time, the acupuncture, everything by the book. And we'd had no further success. So we had just the one embryo to play with. So they wanted us to wait another month, as they do every time, because they wanted the stimulants to leave my body from that round of IVF. So then we were talking now, we got to the September time. And then was the question was, do we do a medicated, was it ovulation? I'm trying to think whether that was a medicated ovulation or whether natural cycle or a medicated cycle. And this was effectively to get my uterus in its prime position. And every time actually I'd been scanned, I remember them saying, like, you've got a textbook uterus. And I was like, of all the things to say, like, great, I've got a fantastic uterus. I've just got shit eggs. And that, again, is often the approach. And that's why it's really hard. And you should be mindful when you're talking to people about IVF. Like, there are so many different routes and reasons why people are having IVF. Like, the majority of people that I've spoken to, it's actually been more of I kind of try and use the analogy of a car. Like, they have all the parts. They just need them oiling and, putting them in the right place, and then the car will run and the baby will come. For me, like, I didn't have one of the fundamental parts. I didn't have the egg. So I had my everything was oiled up, everything was good. So my machinery, my hospitable environment was textbook by all accounts. Nice thick lining. I know of a person who had 5 or 6 or maybe 7 embryos on ice, but just could never get her uterus lining to thicken. Both situations are terribly hard. We only ever had the one embryo, and that was all our hope on that one. But to know that you've got them on ice, but you just can't get them in your body to work, it's just such a hard mental load when all you want to do is just have that child. We had the last, so we had the final, or the one embryo from our second round. And we decided to do a natural cycle because, again, my lining, everything was looking good. So again, that was a pressure. Do you do it medicated? Because you think if I do medicine, it's going to work more. But we decided to do the natural because they were like, there's nothing wrong with your hospitable environment. That's all looking good. So we transferred the embryo on the 3rd of October. And I remember in that build up, I was run down. I was like at my end of it. It had been coming up to 10 months of the IVF, another year and a bit before that of trying. I'd got a cold. I was snotty. I worried I had COVID, so I went to the doctors. And the doctor was actually amazing and basically signed me off work, which is not what I went in for, and it's really like not my style. Because I just want to cope. I just want to do everything and be everything to everybody and still be, oh, well done you managed to do all your work and continue to perform at that level whilst going through IVF. Like, who am I proving that to? I don't know, but I effectively was signed off for work for 2 weeks, and my workplace at the time, I was actually on secondment as well, so working client side, they were fantastic, and it was almost like I'd been given permission to just stop and slow down and focus on this. And when you look back now, I spent 25-ish thousand pounds now. Like, of course, I needed to focus on that. This was the most important thing. And work were amazing. And I'm very fortunate that I have that supportive environment, because I know a lot of people do not, because it's often male-led and they don't necessarily have that experience to be able to be empathetic. But I had the 2 weeks off, and during that period I had the transfer, and I was doing paint by numbers in the day and like puzzles and things that I don't do. to just try and force myself to just take it easy. I needed to recuperate. This was the most important time for my body to be well. I didn't have COVID. They didn't, the cold sort of passed its way out. What my biggest fear was that then if my body wasn't doing its hospital environment and there was a reason and I had a virus or something and it didn't work, we had one shot. So they implanted on the 3rd of, or transferred, should I say, on the 3rd of October. And then we had the 2-week wait, which was hell. Yeah, because also I was off work, so I wasn't like distracted. So again, yeah, I think I came to see you. I paid by numbers, puzzles, chilling out, all stuff I'm not very good at, watching a lot of rubbish TV. And then the day came round, and I think it was the 12th of October. So it's actually 9 days, but they call it the 2-week wait. Went to the clinic and had the blood test, and then you wait for, I think, the next morning until all that afternoon to come through. So I said I didn't want to be called. I wanted to be emailed so that Chris and I could be together. And it was a positive test, but it was a positive test for the but. It was, you are pregnant, but, or however, your levels are low. So your HCG, so it's effectively the response was it's a 50-50 on whether you'll miscarry this or lose it, or whether it will go on to be a viable pregnancy. And I remember getting I really was upset then. As I was just over it, I was like, I can't wait any longer. This is just torture. It's a 2-week wait to give me my answer, and I haven't got an answer. I've got an in between, and I was so frustrated. And Chris was great because he was like, "Look, Charlotte, this is better than it's a negative," and he helped me kind of see that. But I was just sick of the waiting. So we were due to fly to Spain. Again, it's our escape place. And, it's like, can we not go? Do I need to stay here? And they were like, look, there's no reason. People have babies in Spain every day. Because if you are going, where the hospital is, which we do, and go basically and have another blood test out there in a week's time. So they wanted us to stay and go back to them. But I was like, can I do this in Spain? And they said yes. So we went out, and that was again weird. And at this point, I'm not really spiritual. I'm not really a religious person, but I remember having they give you a scan picture when they put the transfer in, which is effectively you see the catheter, the line and a dot, like a flash. It's like a black blow, you don't know what you're looking at when it's actually a baby in there, let alone when it was a tiny embryo. So I had that, and I had and they told us to take pregnancy tests every other day, and they said if the lines are getting stronger, that's also a good sign. And I don't know if that was helpful or not. I think they were trying to give us something to tangibly hold on to in another week's wait. And a friend bought me a little quartz fertility stone, and another friend who's Maltese, her aunt had gone and prayed for me at their church in Malta and given me a little charm to send back. And I took that, and I almost created a little shrine around this picture of just hope, because that's all I had. And it was our only one, and it felt a bit silly, but it kind of gave me each test that I did. I put another one, it was slowly, we think, it kind of looked the same really, but was it getting stronger? And then a week later, I went to get a blood test, and in broken Spanish, I could work out that the levels seemed to appear to be where they should be that was then 4 to 5 weeks pregnant. So, sent them straight onto the clinic, and they came back and said, bingo, bango, this is exactly where you need to be. So this is a really good sign, and you are pregnant. Which was amazing, because this was a low quality embryo that they didn't, originally think would work. So that was amazing. And then we had the wait. Obviously, you're in the danger miscarriage zone at this point. So whilst it was an embryo that they had got to blastocyst, I was still very fearful that at any point this could have been the same as the other ones. But obviously, hoping that it wasn't, hoping that because this has been medically looked at and stimulated and, cultured, this is going to be a strong one compared to the 3 pregnancies we'd had before, where we were just hitting a dud egg. So, yeah, then we had the wait, and we got back, and we had a 6-week scan, and there was a sac, and there was a yolk in the sac. And just seeing, you get very familiar with the wanda, as they call it, but the ultrasound, so there's a scan, your wanda, your fanny. And, he was straight away cracked a massive smile, the sonographer and the doctor that we saw. So we kind of had hope from 6 weeks, went back at 8 weeks. At 8 weeks, I was really fearful because we'd never got to 8 weeks. Again, a positive scan, everything there. And then come 10 weeks, we had another scan, and then that was when I like sobbed at the table because I just didn't believe that we would get that far. I had my recurring miscarriage clinic follow up at 11 weeks. That was my first NHS scan, and I actually went to drop my trousers in the room, and the sonographer was there. I was so used to at that point just getting bits out, and he was like, whoa. Like, what are you doing? I was like, you're going to scan me? He was like, it's an external scan. I was like, sorry, I've never had one of those, again, where you suddenly go from an IVF clinic to NHS, that bit of service. So that was my first over the top scan. Everything was fine. So you start seeing this thing create, and you have hope. And then it was actually 13 weeks because I reluctantly booked in for my 12-week scan because I was so fearful of believing it. And then got to 13 weeks and again asked if we were, they had the check, and I asked if we could believe it. And she said, yes, we can believe that this is a normal pregnancy. You're no longer under IVF. You don't need to be under IVF. You're very normal. You never want to be told you're normal. But it was the best news ever. And I felt like I was like a panic attack. Like my breath was taken from me. Short-lived, but I just, everybody had done it. So there we had 12 weeks. We were out of the danger zone, and we had a little baby growing inside us, which was amazing.
Yeah, so amazing. And how have you found pregnancy? Because often, lots of people in clinic get pregnant, which is great, but often the pregnancy is quite a stressful experience. So sometimes people get to 12 weeks and they go, okay, I'm in. And other times people can't get on board until they've actually had their baby. Like, where have you been on that scale?
Yeah, I think the first 12 weeks was hard because I'm fortunate that I've not had I didn't have any symptoms. So I say fortunate because I wasn't feeling rough. I didn't have nausea, like none of those horrible pregnancy symptoms that a lot of people get. I didn't have anything. I didn't have any aversions. I haven't had any cravings, like other than, I was desperate to sort of feel movement or see something size-wise because it was then tangible. Because before that, it's just, is it inside me and am I going to lose it again? So to 12 weeks, 13 weeks was really difficult. I think Christmas fell over that period. I was fortunate that was a nice distraction. So kind of between week 12 and week 16, when I had then my first midwife appointment, I was nicely distracted. And you kind of like go to milestones. So I think anxiety-wise, past 12 weeks, I actually was surprised how confident I was feeling about it. Because I think once you've had, I don't know if it's not that it gets any easier, but once you've had 3 miscarriages, there is nothing you can do. There is no like keep your feet up, lie down like the olden days. You got to lie down with your head lower than your whatever. Like there is nothing you can do if your body's if you're gonna lose it, you're gonna lose it. And I think you become a bit hardened to that. So I think I just had to take I can, and look, God, nothing against people that don't, but because it's a horrible, horrible headspace. But once I got past 12, I knew there was nothing that I could do to make sure that this baby stayed in. Coming to you during the time. So I think we started, I think it was January. I came to see you in January 2022, and I came to your amazing clinic, which, look, when you're spending all that money for IVF, I wanted to do everything, and I kind of felt like I needed to do acupuncture because it was one of the things in the book that it said I should do. But where do you draw the line on like ultimately the financial outlay? We were paying for all the IVF, so it was difficult for me to justify necessarily all the kind of top. You read things, this is the best person, and Hannah's done this, and she's like written blogs here, and oh my gosh, she's definitely got to be the person I've got to see. But the fact that you run the clinic is, I would just like to say, is amazing because you make it affordable and accessible for people that are struggling with whatever issues that they're going through. So for me to be able to do that, and I found the open clinic fine because I'm a talker, so I didn't mind talking to you about my problems while somebody next door probably had their headphones in and wasn't caring a world about what I was saying. But just to be able to come and have that time. But for me, and as we talked about, just being able to, what I liked about the acupuncture is it was a forced relax for half an hour, but I know you always didn't give me longer, 45 minutes or whatever, sometimes an hour of just lying and my phone wasn't in my hand. I wasn't doing emails, and you had lovely music on, and it was just a chance for me to be in the moment, like be present and just breathe and have this kind of, these needles in, and just have that calm and reset. And it was like a forced situation. Like I would literally be like careering to you, running down the road because I'd be running late, but then it was just like a kind of a space of calm. To your question on like how I've felt during the pregnancy, I have felt good and positive for the majority, and I'm fortunate of that, because I can imagine it could have gone another way.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, for sharing all your story and being so open and honest. It's really lovely to hear you in this situation. It's been such a long journey and you've been through so much. And I just wonder, if some people are listening to this, is there anything that you would pass on, or anything that you would say to somebody who, might be struggling to conceive and feeling lost and overwhelmed? Like, what are your kind of reflections on what you've learned from all of this?
I think it's when people ask me about, like, would you recommend people get tested earlier? I think it's a really difficult. Miscarriage is common. It's not pleasant. It's heartbreaking. And I shouldn't say but, because again, that word, that language makes it sound like, but you get on with it. But I think had I known that things like a blood test after my first miscarriage could have given us some answers sooner, then I could have acted or had the information, make an informed decision to perhaps start that IVF journey sooner. I was fortunate, inverted commas, that I had these 3 miscarriages within a year. So really, for people that are just trying to get pregnant, that can often take a year to 18 months. So I kind of felt like I hadn't lost any time there. I'd had a heartbreak, of course, but I think if if the testing was available in the NHS, we'd all be going and doing it. Of course, there's a financial outlay. I would say to some people, if they have a private healthcare, if they're fortunate enough to have that through work, for example, is to push. Ours is with Bupa, which is quite a common one, and we now have a fertility MOT check, which I campaigned and pushed for. And as part of that, it won't give you cover, like it won't fund your IVF, but it will now cover you for a certain number of tests if you're thinking about trying for a family. So I think if I knew that was available to me as a workplace perk, I would have gone and done that, and then I would have had these results to me a lot sooner.
Yeah.
That said, I don't think we're not talking thousands of pounds to go and have some of these tests. I think if you have a miscarriage, if you're that way inclined and you want to go and get testing, I would maybe say find out what the obvious red flag tests are, and go and have, pay to go and have that check, just because women are generally getting older, waiting. So I think we're quite then impatient when it does come to our time, because we're like, right, I'm going to get pregnant now. I'm 33 when I want to start. I'm going to get pregnant, and then suddenly that clock is on your mind. Particularly older generations that like to remind you of it. So I would say that would be one piece of advice. But I always say I wouldn't. Sometimes that can in itself then become, it should be a lovely natural process. And it's 1 in 4. So the majority of people won't have a miscarriage. So it's where you sit on that kind of health anxiety point of view. And I wouldn't want to encourage somebody to get too concerned too early on if they've not even started trying. So it's a balance. I think you have to make that judgment. But I think it's worth saying that it's not bank breaking.
No.
Well, I want to be conscious when I say that, but it's something you could go and get the test, or at least get the knowledge and understanding of how the reproductive system actually works and what things may or may not affect things.
Yeah.
Seeing people like yourself who, whether that be polycystic ovaries, whether that be like really crazy heavy periods. Like I remember, in our open clinic, there have been things I've heard and I think, Christ, that person's having a real nightmare. That's just their general periods once a month, I think there's just so much knowledge that we don't have. So seeing somebody like yourself and then making that informed decision on, do I want to go and get tests, or shall I try for a bit longer? So I'd say that is one piece of advice. I would say for me, I really wanted to educate people about particularly the IVF process. And Alex Jones from The One Show, it's on UK TV Play, which is a free app that you can download on any smart TV or your phone. She did an 8-part series called Making Babies, and it was with King's Fertility Clinic in South London again. And I just thought that was a really fantastic kind of review or documentary on the IVF process. And for me, I asked friends, I asked family, my parents, I sat and watched it with, my aunt and uncle, my cousin particularly invested in watching it because it's a really lonely place, IVF, and unless you have somebody close going, even then, what can be difficult is their route to it may be so different. And I think the show covered a really good variety of routes as to why people go and everything from single parenting, so people wanting to have a baby on their own. Like, it kind of just covers, it's a very modern, very clear show on how the process works and just how crushing and heartbreaking it can be. I remember my dad saying, like, I don't know how you're sitting and watching this. And I was a bit teary in my eyes, and I was like, Dad, because this is the reality of what I'm going through, and I need you to understand. He didn't like watching it because he's just thinking that's what my daughter's going through. But I was like, you need to know how this works, because then you get it a bit more. And I think for me, those friends that invested in watching that, when I was then able to say to them, right, I've gone to the clinic, I've had a scan, I've got 6 follicles, like, they were able to understand at a level that I didn't have to go back to basics every time, which is exhausting. And that's when you often get there, I'm doing okay, we're in our round. You don't get the chance to be able to offload. So I'd say finding your communities, as I mentioned before, I was in the trying to conceive, asking people, are you pissing on the sticks? Weeing on the sticks? Are you doing, obviously, you kind of go in that gang. So then I've had a miscarriage, and now I'm here. And then multiple miscarriages. And then now I'm in IVF. And, for me, the gangs, the groups get smaller and smaller. You have to reach out for them. And then I was, had the door open for egg donor. And I know of 2 people, one that was a sperm donor and they were both the most amazing, like, were able to say, look, you're not there yet, but when you're there, I'm here. And for me, knowing that there was communities or people that I could actually speak to was really helpful. But as I said, I'm a talker. I put out on social media. I wanted people to know, I wanted people to be conscious. I wanted to educate them on the process, because I think it's such a taboo still and such an unknown. And I hope that I have, definitely done that with friends who now have come to me saying, I've got a friend going through IVF. What was that show? We want to watch it. We want to support. I think it's get yourself informed as best you can, even if there's a bit of a financial outlay for that. Read, but read sensibly. Don't just Google stuff. That book, It Starts With the Egg, was really helpful. I'm sure there are many others out there. So get proper material. And then, your support group, just set your boundaries as well with what you want from them and what you don't want from them. And I think you can be selfish, as you need to be, whether that be around announcements, baby showers. I told my friends exactly how I wanted to be told, which then makes it, it's about you. But actually, it is about me, because I'm the one having a real shit show over here. And your news is amazing, and of course is, and I'm only delighted because of the struggle that I'm going through. But I need to have a chance to process that before I'm able to kind of celebrate it, because it's just another crushing, dagger to the heart of everybody else is succeeding and you're not. And look after yourself, which is the bit I wasn't always so good at, but taking the time, doing things like acupuncture, finding a place where it can be affordable, and putting yourself first, and knowing that self-care is productive time, not just, I haven't got time for a half an hour bath. You've got to put your mind there as well as your body. They would be my takeaways.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. It's so wonderful to have this conversation with you, and to be sitting here with you about to have your baby. It really is amazing, and I wish you all the best
Thank you.
For the future and the
so
next chapter. And I look forward to seeing you in clinic, hopefully soon. If you've enjoyed listening to this and want to find out more, then come and join my free community in Facebook. We have loads of resources. You can catch up on all our previous webinars and be the first to know about forthcoming events. To sign up, just follow the link in the show notes. And if you'd like to work one-to-one with myself or one of the team, then please see our website, hannahpern.com, where you can book in directly or organise a discovery call to find out how we can support your fertility and your reproductive health.